Google just dropped Banana Nano, a tiny AI model for image generation, and today I will show you how to hook it up and potentially turn it into your next SaaS product. We are taking a basic React Router V7 starter and turning it into a full AI-powered editing studio that can basically replace Photoshop. You will be able to upload an image, type your changes, and get back an AI-generated image. Okay, so to get started, we land on aisdk.dev, and here we have a first package to install. So let's copy it, paste it, and we also will need a Vercel's AI package called just AI. So let's install both of them. When that's done, we can go to create a new file called .env. Inside the env file, we will need our Gemini key. So we can go to aistudio.google.com. Here, pressing on sidebar, we can press get API key, and here create API key. Here we can just pick Gemini API and create API key in existing project. When key is generated, we can copy it inside .env file. We will call it Google Generative AI API key, and then we can just paste it in. And I would recommend you naming it a Google Generative AI API key, just because Vercel's AI SDK automatically looks for that variable in your environment key. So it will be automatically read. Otherwise, you can go back to docs, and here, if you use create Google Generative AI, you can pass API key, and that way you can name it however you want. And now when our setup is done, we can go to routes and create our new file called studio.tsx. And inside, we can just create a studio component, and let's export it too. We can start our project by running pnpm dev. And now when the project is running, just go to localhost 3000 and studio. Now let's add some styling to our component. So let's write div studio inside, and here we can add some padding, flex, and max width of 7 with margin inline auto. We should also add it with full, and now it's expanding the full. Let's add our first card from Shadcn, and inside the card header, we can also import it, add a card title, also don't forget to import it, and let's name it image upload. We have a simple card now. Let's add some styling to this, make it for Excel and some margin. Now for the content, we can add card content. Inside we will have a React Router form with input of file, a submit button, and also a text area, which we also import from Shadcn. Let's name it a prompt, and for input, we can also change it to Shadcn input, and same goes for the button. Save. And now as we can see, we got our select and the text area plus the upload button. For form, we will need a method of post and also enc type of multi-part form data. This is really important when you're sending a file to your server as an action. Let's add some margins here. Empty 2. For this, we will have 4. Amazing. Now we can copy this card, paste it, and this will be for AI generated image. We don't need a form here, but for now we can just have a p tag of no image generated yet. Amazing. Let's also flex one this, and inside our content we also flex call flex 1. So this will expand now full width and height of this. And inside we can just justify its center to make it aligned in center. Now we should wrap our card components. So we wrap them in div, and we can have a grid of 2 calls with gap of 4. Now on mobile it looks wrong. So for grid calls we just add MD. This means that above medium screen sizes it will expand to 2 calls, and below that it will always be 1. We can also test it by expanding it, and we see it's working. So let's go back. So now, when we have our form ready, let's export const action with route of studio. So we import it from type studio, and we define it as action args. Now when we have our action, let's get form data from await request form data. Now when receiving our form data, let's just tab here, and we will be receiving our image and prompt, which we named here. Name prompt. So it's going in here, and name image is going here. Here's a quick error handling, so I will keep it. So if there's no image or prompt, then we just return an error. And also we can add generated image also as null, because we will return it later on. Now as we can see, the types are wrong. So here is form data entry. So we can force it as file. And here we can just force it as string. We will also need to create a base64 data from this image. So we can start by const image buffer equal to buffer from, and we just tab await image array buffer. And now when we have our buffer created, let's create const base64, and then we just take image buffer to string and then base 64. And this is important because our AI model accepts base 64 as images. Now, when we have that done, we can console log base 64 and check if our form is working. Let's pick a random photo and hello, upload. As we can see, our action was triggered and we got our base 64. And now if we go back to AI SDK docs, we can scroll downwards. And here's the usage of generate text function. Let's copy this, paste it in. And we also select the imports, which we just copy and paste it into. Here for text, we will not be using text since we're generating images. So just write result. For the model, we will actually be using flash image preview because that's a banana nano model. For the prompt, we will have an array and inside the object of role. And this accepts assistant, system, tool, user. But we are sending user context. So we name it user. And then below we can have content of array, and inside we will have type of text, and then we also just send the text of prompt, which we get here. And below we will have a type of image, and then we will also send this image base 64, which we created right here. This way we are able to send our text prompt and also image, so it gets a context of what kind of image it is and what you should do with that image. For example, if you would like to build the whole chat, you wouldn't use prompt, but you could use messages, and this will work just fine too. But to build out the whole chat, you would also need to have then role of assistance and replies and keep it in database or something just stored. Now back on our local host, there's no changes, but now we can actually console log result, and we can see it returns files. So let's just console log files. And we also forgot previously to return, so we return empty object for now. Now let's refresh the site. Let's select photo called car, and let's say make the car wrap blue. Upload. Here we got our photo uploaded from console log here. And now after a bit, we can see we received our base 64 data. So here is the AI response. So now we know that result files 0.base64 exist, and that's our image generated. Now for us to be able to display this image, we will create a const called generated image URL, and here we will actually use this hack to make it into the data. So data image JPEG base 64 and result files base 64. Here we could actually even use image.type. So it's the image we got from here and we're using the type of it. Now when we have the whole URL, we can just return as we had here, generated image and the URL, and error is null. Awesome. Now on our studio component, we can actually get action data from all type route component props. And here it returns error or generated image or possibly undefined. To display our generated image, we can actually go to the card we made, and then we create action data generated image, and then we display either image or no image generated yet. Now our image should be appearing right here when it's generated. Let's also quickly add some pending UI. So to create pending UI, we just create const navigation equals to use navigation hook. Let's import it. And to get the pending state, we just write const is submitting equal to navigation state submitting. And here we can check for idle, loading, and submitting. That's what we need. Now we can use this is submitting on our button. So disabled equal to is submitting. And we can also add something like is submitting, generating, and generate. Let's make the button actually with full, so it expands nicely like this. We can also use pending state right here. So let's make this into div and use condition is submitting question mark. We give it a loader icon. Let's close it. And otherwise, we just write no image generated yet. AI already added animation spin, which is a Tailwind default animation. And this makes it so the icon will spin around. Also, I would like to show user selected image. So when you select here, like a image of preview, so we can get this before and after effect. And the easiest way I thought of it was just creating a state called preview set preview equal to use state, which we also import. Under here, we can just create const handle change function with e being type of React change event HTML input element. Let's take that. And then const file equal to file target. And if there is file, and it was a file that was changed to, we can set a preview of actually URL create object URL file. And this will make like a blob of our image. it will be looking something like blob, local host 3000, and image ID basically. When that's done, we should also actually think about memory leaks when using create object. So if preview exists already when selecting a new file, you use URL revoke object URL preview. This means it will remove the existing URL. This is important to prevent memory leaks. And now when we have this function, we can go to our input here and write on change equal to handle change. And also it suggests me to do images, which is correct, except only images and every single image type. When that's done, we have our preview, but we are not displaying it anywhere. So above form, we can just write preview, and then we do image tag with source preview and alt preview. Now, if we browse here and select image of car, it shows. Amazing. After a hard refresh, we can actually browse and select a room, and we can prompt it to please decorate the room with nice sofa and add a TV behind it, which doesn't really make sense since why would you have a TV behind the sofa? But for this prompt, we'll check it out. And here we got our AI generated image, and it's so amazing how simple and quick this was. Of course, the app is not fully ready to be sold, but we have a main functionality ready. We can now prompt it, upload the image, and get our generated image. I want to expand a little bit to show what else you could improve, and there's many ways to do so. For example, adding functionality to combine multiple user images, or making a way for users to keep prompting on top of already generated image. For example, now we have this image generated, and if I prompt again, it would, for example, add on top of this image. Currently, with our approach, if I change this to add flowers, it would just take here and add flowers without having a sofa or TV. But I want to show a quick way on how to make these images downloadable. So here we can go to our card where the image is generated. Let's wrap this inside a div since we're using an extra element now. Let's give it a tag, and then in an a tag we just add a href of action data generated image and make it download. Here we can also name the file. So for example, generated image day.now.png. Let's also add a class name of actually button variants from chassis, and we can have it as variant outline plus some margin on top. Let's also give it a width of full, the same as we have here. And now if we try selecting another image, let's say Coca-Cola, and we text it to create an ad, generate. And we can also see that our pending UI is working, which is amazing. Amazing, and we got our image generated. The API took extremely long, but I think something is wrong with the API now. If we scroll downwards, we can see our ad, and now we see our download button. For some reason, it didn't get the stylings, but if we press on it, it actually downloads the image, and it was extremely easy to do with just href and one functionality. Now back in the app, I would also like to show you how to keep history of all these images. So for example, if I create a new image now, we would lose this one. So let's quickly add a global const called history. And history will be an empty array for now, but we can define types for it, which will be ID of string. And we just take base 64 image as string. Of course, instead of using global variable, it would be better to use something like database. But for this example, I want to keep the simplicity. Let's now export const loader. And inside loader, we can just return the whole history. It's also giving us an error, which I forgot to add, but this is array. To explain why we're returning it from loader once again when we have it globally accessed everywhere, it's just because when we trigger action, it also retriggers our loaders. So here it will keep our data and history in sync. And here, if we scroll downwards, below generated image URL, we can actually push into our history. So history.push ID, we can have it as crypto random UID. And base 64 is exactly as what we got previously from our AI. We can also remove this console log. So now after each respawn, the history will be pushed inside and we can receive every image generated. So in Studio, let's go to loader data, and loader data is a type of history. So we can get it, history. Now we can actually scroll downwards, and below our grid, we can create a div. And this div will have a class of margin, padding, and border, and rounded Excel. Inside our div, we can actually history.mapIt, and we call it item and arrow function to return a card. Key will be of item ID. Let's close this. Now in card header, we can have an image tag with source item.base64, and also we can give it an alt of generated image. Now below, we can have a card content with a button of download. We also href item base64 and do exactly as we did before. And on download, we generate the image .now. The div border is actually already showing, so we can do history.length, and we only show this div when it's above 0 and wrap this around. And as you can see, it disappeared. Now let's hard refresh this. Let's select a old man car image, and here we can make it so change his car into a Lambo. Press generate, and here our image was generated. You can see this old man is behind his Lamborghini. If you scroll downwards, we can also see our generated image, which is for some reason not showing up, but I think it's because here we saved it actually wrong. We shouldn't be using base64, but we should actually be using generated image URL. So let's replace that. And also I noticed I forgot to add here a grid of grid calls. Let's say 5, and then when it goes more to mobile, let's say grid calls 2. Maybe we could fit 2 images right here. And then yeah, it goes card. Amazing. Let's try this again. We can do the same prompt, change his car into a Lambo, generate. And here our image was generated again with a new Lamborghini, which is blue. And here under, actually this time the button variants were attached correctly. We can download this image. Press here, and here we actually received it. Let's close this, and now we can actually try generating something new. Like, let's change this car. Wrap the car in half red, half black wrap, and also put it into a cinematic dark rainy weather. Press generate, and our image was generated and it's looking sick. And here also on the history, we can actually see our older image and our brand new image. Let's make this full screen, and here we can follow our history. I think Banana Nano is awesome, and there's so many ways to take advantage of it. For this app, I would update the design even more, just prompting AI and improving UX UI with ShadCN. But for today, that was it. I hope it was easy to follow through, and take care.